If you're a fan of trampling the Constitution and American civil liberties and taking guns away without any meaningful due process, you're going to love the latest efforts by the Biden administration. But if you're not a fan, well, John Lott's here to tell you why you've assessed this correctly. John Lott is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, and he joins us now. Hello, John. Good to have you back with us, sir.
It's great to talk to you, Vince. Thanks for having me on.
We hear about these red flag laws in various states across the country, which allow authorities to take guns from people before they're even really given their due process rights. But now the Biden administration is trying to take this a step further. What are they up to?
Well, on Saturday, they announced that they had set up an agency within the Department of Justice to try to push these laws. And, in the Bipartisan Community Safety Act that you and I have talked about before, they granted the government grants to go and give out to encourage this. But that's setting up a whole department to go and deal with this is a step further. I mean, normally, not that this is unusual for the Biden administration, normally you have to have like congressional approval to go and do something like that. But the Biden administration has taken upon themselves that they don't need congressional approval to set up a new department. And,
to create a brand new department out of whole cloth, and the department would be dedicated to doing what?
It's to go and try to push states to go and adopt these red flag laws. So they will be coordinating with them and providing information and I guess helping them lobby almost for these types of things, as well as giving up to $750 million in grants to states that change their laws and adopt the types of rules that the Biden administration wants them to do. They claim that they're doing this in order to save lives. I don't think it's going to have the desired effect. I mean, everybody wants to try to go and stop dangerous people from having guns. But the thing that the Biden administration just refuses to recognize, and gun control people generally, is that all 50 states already have laws on the books to do that. They're called civil commitment type rules. And so if you think somebody's a danger to themselves or others, what you can do is you can call the police. The police will come out. The police, if the police believe that there's a, quote, reasonable chance, end quote, of the person, in fact, being a danger to themselves or others, which basically just means that the police think that there's about a 20% chance that that's the case, they can take the person in for a mental health care evaluation. If the mental health care professionals agree that there's a reasonable chance that the person is a danger to themselves or others, there can be an immediate hearing. And if you can't afford a lawyer, one will be provided for you. And there'll be a hearing and evidence will be presented. And if the judge finds that you are a danger to yourself or others, the judge has a whole range of options that he can do. He can go and say, look, if you agree to do outpatient treatment, we'll have you come back in a week or two and we'll reevaluate the situation. If he thinks the person might drive a car through a crowd of people, he can take away their driver's license or he can take away their guns. Or in the most extreme case, the judge can go and involuntarily commit the person. By contrast with these red flag laws, there's no hearing when the guns are taken away. All the judge sees is a piece of paper with a written complaint. He doesn't talk to the person who made the complaint. He doesn't talk to the person that the complaint is made about. And, maybe within a month, there'll be a hearing on it after the guns have been taken away. But there's no lawyer provided for you. I've talked to lawyers that handle these cases. You're talking about $10,000 or so up to do it. So, and the only thing that the judge can do is to take away the person's guns. And so you may risk losing your guns, but is it really worth $10,000 to you if that's the only thing that can happen? But there's a more fundamental problem, and that is these are usually used for suicide, for example. If you really believe somebody's suicidal, is it a serious solution to only take away their guns? As if there are not other ways to commit suicide. I'll give you one piece of evidence. Washington, D.C. and Chicago had handgun bans. And there was a drop in firearm and handgun suicides afterwards. But there was no change in total suicides. People simply switched to other ways to go and commit suicide. And so there are no mental health people involved. People aren't being helped in other ways. The gun control activists in the Biden administration want you to think if there's a problem and you merely take away somebody's guns, then that solves the problem there. Then there's no problem. And they refuse to recognize how bad consequences. I have a good friend of mine, somebody I think you know, Andy Pollock, who lost his daughter in the Parkland school shooting. After that happened, he wanted to leave the area and moved all the way across the country to rural Oregon. When he moved in there, there were some neighbors that just happened to move in next door to him at the same time from California who just hated Andy politically. And they filed an extreme risk protection order against him. His guns were taken away. And when there was finally a hearing, the judge didn't even require Andy to put on a defense. The judge said, "There's no threat here. Why did you even file this complaint here?" And the problem is that when Andy had his guns taken away, you know, he lives in rural Oregon. There are bears and mountain lions. He had a mountain lion that he ran into right next to his house. He had his dog with him, and the dog kind of tried to defend Andy. Ended up having to have 50 stitches on its side for having battled the mountain lion there. But Andy would normally have his handgun there, but he was disarmed because of this complaint, which if there had been a hearing, if there had been the due process that you mentioned, never would have happened.
That's incredible. I'm sorry, I don't even know how I missed. Was there much news on Andy Pollock being served a red flag gun grab? I don't even remember this story.
It was local news I mean, I've written about it a couple times, but there was local news in Oregon about it.
Unbelievable. And so his daughter, Meadow, right?
Right, exactly.
She was killed in a school shooting. He's responded to it by saying that it's important for Americans, good Americans, to be armed to protect themselves. He is armed to protect himself against risks, including natural ones like animals. And his neighbors call the cops on him because they disagree with his political views, which, by the way, he arrived at through the loss of his daughter in a horrifying moment. And the authorities came in, they took his guns away without any meaningful due process.
Right, exactly. Just based solely, as these red flag laws work, based solely on the written complaint from these neighbors.
It's lunacy. So this is, I mean, do serious constitutional lawyers think that this is actually in any way constitutional, that the government can do this?
Well, people are starting to challenge these laws, and it's going to work their ways up through the courts. I mean, it's going to take a while. It's going to take years. You know, unfortunately, one point to bring up, because I was chief economist at the U.S. Sentencing Commission. I worked in the Department of Justice. When people bring false complaints, they're never punished for doing it. You know, so there's no consequences for this couple that lived next door to him to have filed this complaint that was completely meritless there. There's no penalty for them. They just harassed their neighbor. And you know, it's not just neighbors who may disagree with somebody politically. There could be other motives that are there, or it could be even well-meaning people. You know, you may. So one of the people that worked for my center, Nikki Gozer, she 15 years ago, her husband was murdered in front of her by one of her stalkers, and she was very depressed afterwards. And you can imagine, you could get a situation where, you know, a friend or a neighbor or whatever could say, you know, Nikki's very depressed. She has a gun, and they could be well-meaning and go and put in a complaint on it. And if her guns were taken away, her life, she'd be devastated because she was afraid going out anyway in public, even being able to go and carry a gun.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, given your long varied career, including working at the Sentencing Commission, the idea of depriving somebody of their rights is one that the government has to cross an immense number of hurdles to do. You can't merely throw someone in prison for no reason, although the left has an appetite for doing that these days. You're entitled to due process. Like you're innocent until proven guilty. All of the, basically all of the advantages are given to the accused for a reason. It's meant to protect your rights. And yet here, it's been turned on its head, especially with these laws designed to take people's guns away without any due process.
Right. There's a reason why they want to go and set up a new law, these red flag laws, as opposed to making some tweak, if they think there should be, on these civil commitment laws that all 50 states and the federal government already have.
Right.
And that is, there's already all these protections, like a lawyer's provided for you if you can't afford one. That there's a hearing and stuff, because they know that'd be a lot harder to go into an existing law and pull out those protections than simply frame this as a gun provision. And, again, these guys just want you to think if you could take away somebody's guns, then that solves the problem. It's just, there's not some other way you could go and harm yourself or others. If there's really a serious problem, how is it a useful solution just to say, we're going to take away their guns?
I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but you're the data guy. You definitely have a lot of this. How often is this used against veterans? How often are red flag laws invoked against veterans, military veterans?
We don't have any data broken down by military veterans, but I mean, you see there are many thousands of times that these are used in different states.
Yeah, I just wonder. That's the kind of thing I feel like the government would target military veterans. The other thing I always think about is with red flag laws is a couple years back, you may remember in Maryland, there was a man in his 60s who was shot dead by a police officer who was enforcing that state's red flag laws.
5 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, and they went and they were like, give us your gun. And he's like, who are you? What? You're my gun? And he reached for his gun on the table, and they shot him. They shot him right there in his own home, trying to take the gun from him. This is a very dangerous thing to try and do. And again, they didn't adjudicate it. They just went and they went to grab the gun first.
Right. Well, the whole point of these laws is they're set up so as not to inform the person in advance that the complaint's even been filed. You don't know until the police actually show up on your door to take your guns.
And that creates more risk for both the citizen as well as the cops.
Right. Exactly.
It's wild. All right. So what's next here with, I know that you've been talking to members of Congress, Congressman Thomas Massie. You just wrote an article on this subject for the Federalist. What's next here? What do we do with the Biden administration? They're launching an entire office without any congressional approval designed to encourage this type of trampling of Second Amendment rights.
Right. Well, my understanding is that Jim Jordan is going to hold a hearing in the Judiciary Committee on this. And I'm sure there'll be some people who will challenge this in court. The problem is that this is just part of a pattern, whether it be, vaccine mandates or whether it be student loans, or I'm sure we could list a whole bunch of other things, changing some of the immigration rules. The Biden administration doesn't seem to care whether or not it has congressional authority to allow them to do these types of things. They just do them and then say, sue us, and know that it's going to take years to go through the courts. I mean, and the thing is, by the end of this year, you're going to have about 70% of the circuit and district court judges in the country are Democrats. And they slow walk a lot of these cases. And so, we see this on the gun cases all over the place, where the Ninth Circuit and Second Circuit and whatever are slow walking a lot of the lawsuits that are there, just because they know by the end of the next administration, Clarence Thomas will be 80, Sam Alito will be 78. You lose one or both of those guys, you're going to have a very different Supreme Court. And so I assume you're probably going to run into a similar type of thing here with regard to, this type of case.
Yeah, a relentless, deliberate assault on your rights. John Lott, thank you very much from the Crime Prevention Research Center. Always appreciate your time, sir. Great to talk to you today. Thank you.
Well, thanks for being there.